What's good, everybody? This is Quad B, formerly known as Bamboozled Black Baby Boomer, hence the four Bs. And I wanted to come on today, first of all, to say Happy Father's Day to all all the proud patriarchs out there who are unapologetic about their manhood and leading their families, because that is what's needed. That is that that is that is what's needed. So anyhow, I just wanted to say again, Happy Father's Day to all the patriarchs out there, and to just to say hello. The reason I wanted to come on today was, as you can see, the title of this video is a Father's Day message about Dr. King. Now you might wonder, okay, what does Father's Day have to do with Dr. King? And that be, when I say Dr. King, that would be obviously Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And, well, he was a father. I guess he probably he died too young to be a he didn't see, I don't think he saw any grandchildren in his lifetime. But and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was a father. But the reason I wanted to talk about Dr. King, I found an article from way back in 2011, and it talked about the wisdom. I took it as the wisdom of Black fathers. And this was a guy, this person who wrote this article, talked about what Martin Luther King actually did. And what happened was he learned a few things about Martin Luther King by talking to whom? His father. And his father set him straight on a couple of things having to do with Dr. King. And when I read this article for the first time a few years back, I thought, holy crap. Dude's father was absolutely right. So, you see, Hamden Rice, somebody who calls himself Hamden Rice, wrote this article. And it was posted on the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. It was also posted on the anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. And what I wanted to tell y'all was that this man's father, like I said, dropped some real gems on this dude who was just back from college, according to his diary. But anyway, let me read a little bit from it. This will be a very short diary. It will not contain any links or scholarly references. It is about a very narrow topic from a personal, subjective perspective. The topic at hand is what Martin Luther King actually did, what it was that he actually accomplished. What most people who reference Dr. King seem not to know is how Dr. King actually changed the subjective experience in the life of life in the United States for African Americans. And yeah, I said for African Americans, not for Americans, because his main impact was his effect on the lives of African Americans, not Americans in general. His main impact was not to make white people nicer or fairer. That's why some of us who are African Americans get a bit possessive about his legacy. Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy despite what our civil religion tells us, is not colorblind. So let's move on. And this is here's the meat of it. I remember that many years ago when I was a smartass home from my first year of college. Hold on one second. My first year, okay. At first, okay, let me start again. I'm sorry about that. Let me start again. I remember many years ago when I was a smartass home from first year of college, I was standing in the kitchen arguing with my father. My head was full of newly discovered political ideologies and Black nationalism, and I had just read the autobiography of Malcolm X, probably for the second time. A bit of context. My father was from a background which, if we were talking about Europe or Latin America, we would call peasant origin. Yay, Nitro. Happy Father's Day. Thank you. Okay, my father was from a background which, if we were talking about Europe or Latin America, we would call peasant origin, although he had risen solidly into the working middle class. He was from rural Virginia, and his parents had been tobacco farmers. I spent 2 weeks or so every summer on the farm of my grandmother and step-grandfather. They had no running water, no gas, a wood-burning stove, no bathtubs or toilets, but an outhouse, potbelly stoves for heat in the winter, a giant wood pile, a smokehouse where ham and bacon hung, chickens, pigs, semi-wild house cats that lived outdoors, no tractor or car, but an old plow horse and plows and other horse-drawn implements, and electricity only after I was about 8 years old. The area did not have high schools for Blacks, and my father went as far as the 7th grade in a one-room schoolhouse. All 4 of his grandparents, whom he had known as a child, had been born slaves. It was mainly because of World War II and urbanization that my father left that life. They lived in a valley or hollow or holler in which all the landowners and tenants were Black. In the morning, if you wanted to talk to Cousin Taft, you would walk down to behind the outhouse and yell across the valley, "Hey, Taft!" And you could see him far in the distance come out his cabin and yell back. On one hand, this was a pleasant situation because they lived in isolation from white people. On the other hand, they did have to leave the valley to go to town where all the rigid rules of Jim Crow applied. By the time I was little, my people had been in this country for 6 generations, going back, according to oral rendering of our genealogy, to Africa Jones and Mama Suki, much more under slavery than freedom, and all of it under some form of racial terrorism, which had inculcated many humiliating behavior patterns. Anyway, that's background. I think we were kind of typical as African Americans in the pre-civil rights era went. So anyway, I was having this argument with my father about Martin Luther King and how his message was too conservative compared to Malcolm X's message. My father got really angry at me. It wasn't that he disliked Malcolm X, but his point was that Malcolm X hadn't accomplished anything as Dr. King had. I was kind of sarcastic and asked something like, "So what did Martin Luther King accomplish other than giving his I Have a Dream speech?" Before I tell you what my father told me, I want to digress, because at this point, our amnesiac national existence, my question pretty much reflects this national civic religion view of what Dr. King accomplished. He gave this great speech, or some people say he marched. I was so angry at Mrs. Clinton during the primaries when she said that Dr. King had marched, but it was LBJ who delivered the Civil Rights Act. At this point, I would like everybody, I'm sorry, at this point, I would like to remind everyone exactly what Martin Luther King did. And it wasn't that he marched or gave a great speech. My father told me with a sort of cold fury, quote, Dr. King ended the terror of living in the South, close quote. Please let this sink in and take my word and the word of my late father on this. There's that paternal wisdom. That was my word. Those were my words. Going back to the article, if you are a white person who has always lived in the U.S. and never under a brutal dictatorship, you probably don't know what my father was talking about. But this is what the great Martin Luther King accomplished. Not that he marched, nor that he gave speeches. He ended the terror of living as a black person, especially in the South. I'm guessing that most of you, especially having come fresh from seeing The Help, remember this was an article from 2011, may not understand what this was all about. But living in the South and parts of the Midwest and in many ghettos of the North was living under terrorism. It wasn't that black people had to use a separate drinking fountain or couldn't sit at lunch counters or sit at the back of the bus or had to sit at the back of the bus. You really must disabuse yourself of this idea. Lunch counters and buses were crucial symbolic planes of struggle that the civil rights movement used to dramatize the issue. But the main suffering in the South did not come from our inability to drink from the same fountain, ride in front of the bus, or eat lunch at Woolworths. It was that white people, mostly white men, occasionally went berserk and grabbed random black people, usually men, and lynched them. You know all about lynching, but you may forget or not know that white people also randomly beat black people, and the black people could not fight back for fear of even worse punishment. This constant low-level dread of atavistic violence is what kept the system running. It made life miserable, stressful, and terrifying for black people. White people also occasionally tried black people, especially black men, for crimes for which they could not conceivably be guilty. With the willing participation of white women, they often accuse black men of, quote, assault, unquote, which could be anything from rape to not taking off one's hat to, quote, reckless eyeballing, close quote. This is going to sound awful and perhaps a stain on my late father's memory, but when I was little, before the civil rights movement, my father taught me many, many humiliating practices in order to prevent the random terroristic berserk behavior of white people. The one I remember most is that when walking down the street in New York City side by side, hand in hand with my hero father, if a white woman approached on the same sidewalk, I was to take off my hat and walk behind my father because he had been taught in the South that black males, for some reason, were supposed to walk single file in the presence of any white lady. This is just one of the many humiliating practices we were taught to prevent white people from going berserk. I remember a huge family reunion one August with my aunts and uncles and cousins gathered around my grandparents' vast breakfast table laden with food from the farm, and the state troopers drove up to the house with a car full of rifles and shotguns, and everyone went kind of weirdly blank. They put on the masks that black people used back then to not provoke white berserkness. My strong, valiant, self-educated, articulate uncles, whom I adored, became shuffling step-and-fetchits to avoid provoking the white men. Fortunately, the troopers were only looking for an escaped convict. Afterwards, the women, my aunts, were furious at the humiliating performance of the men and said so, something that even a child could understand. Huh, that sounds familiar. The women were pissed that the men cowered had to play like they were cowering in the face of these white law enforcement officers who just drove up on their home. This is the climate of fear that Dr. King ended. If you didn't get taught such things, let alone experience them, I caution you against invoking the memory of Dr. King as though he belongs exclusively to you and not primarily to African Americans. The question is, how did Dr. King do this? He didn't do it alone. So what did they do? I'm just skipping down. They told us, whatever you are most afraid of doing vis-a-vis white people, go do it. Go ahead down to City Hall and try to register to vote, even if they say no, even if they take their name down. Go ahead and sit at that lunch counter. Sue the local school board. All the things that most black people would have said back then without exaggeration were stark, raving insane and would get you killed. If we all do it together, we will be okay. They made black people experience the worst of the worst collectively that white people could dish out and discover that it wasn't that bad. They taught black people how to take a beating from the Southern cops, from police dogs, from fire department hoses. They actually coached young people how to crouch, cover their heads with their arms, and take the beating. They taught people how to go to jail, which terrified most decent people. And you know what? The worst of the worst wasn't that bad. Once people had been beaten, had dogs sicked on them, had fire hoses sprayed on them, and had been thrown in jail, you know what happened? These magnificent young black people began singing freedom songs in jail. That, my friends, is what ended the terrorism of the South. Confronting your worst fears, living through it, and breaking out in a deep-throated freedom song. The jailers knew they had lost when they beat the crap out of these young Negroes, and the jail-beaten young people began to sing joyously, first in one town, then in another. This is what the writer James Baldwin captured like no other writer of the era. So it goes on, but let me see here. So yes, Dr. King had many other goals, including transcendent non-racial policy goals that apply to white people too, like ending poverty, reducing the warlike aspects of our foreign policy, promoting the New Deal of universal employment, and so on. But his main accomplishment was ending 200 years of racial terrorism by getting black people to confront their fears. So don't tell me that Dr. Martin Luther King's dream had not been achieved unless you knew what racial terrorism was like back then and can make a convincing case that you can still feel it today. If you did not go through that transition, you are not qualified to say that the dream was not accomplished. This is what Dr. King did, not march, not give good speeches. He crisscrossed the South organizing people, helping them not be afraid and encouraging them like Gandhi did in India to take the beating that they had been trying to avoid all their lives. Once the beating was over, we were free. So I'll link to this article in the comments section once this stream is over. And that's why I wanted to talk about Dr. King on Father's Day, because here was a man who thought he knew it all, but his father who had been walking the planet a few years longer than his son, knew a little bit more. Let that sink in for a second. And when I first read this article about 3 or 4 years ago, I said, holy shit, this, I had never seen anything like this before. I'd never seen anything, how, Dr. King's goal encapsulated in this way, but it's true. It's true. I was not born in the South. I was born in the North, in New York. I was born around the time Jim Crow was being dismantled, at least the overt Jim Crow. We still got remnants of it. Yeah. We can still feel it today. You're right, Mr. Counsel. And we're still being terrorized, but it's more of a subtle kind of a thing, I think. But I'm trying to imagine what would happen if these folks decided, oh, we're going to just start lynching Negroes again. Like, really? Really? Well, you could try, but I could get $900 up and buy a Glock 9 too. I could easily buy a gun. I mean, bring it on. Bring it on. Just be prepared. If you want to get rid of us, you're going to have to be prepared to sacrifice a few of yours, because we're not going down quietly, But I read this and it was great. I loved it. But the reason I brought this up was because, father's wisdom. This dude thought he knew it all when he went away to college, was probably getting, indoctrinated with some leftist Marxist thinking, or at least that's what they say was happening in universities. Of course, I went to school and I don't remember being Marxist indoctrinated, but then again, maybe it was, of course, this was in the South. That probably wasn't happening. I went to school in the South, believe it or not. But I have to say that the article just hit me like a ton of bricks. It really did hit me like a ton of bricks. I also spoke to my father today. He's in his mid-80s and he's just kind of chilling up the way near Philly. I'm coming at you, by the way, again, I always say, I'm coming at you from the DC area, but he's up near Philly in New Jersey, out near Philly. And he grew up in Philly, and it took a while, many, many years, but he recently started telling me stories about what it was like to grow up as a Depression baby. He was born in the 30s and came of age in the 40s. And I would have to say that being a black man in the 1940s had to suck. It really did. And he was growing up in what I like to call Jim Crow Philadelphia. He said it was rough. He said he got it. His family got it all sides, mainly because most of his family is pretty fair-skinned. He's fair-skinned. My mom's dark-skinned. And he said they got it from both sides. They got it from the white people and from the darker skinned Negroes back then. But he talked about the cops too. He talked about how a cop, if they just beat the shit out of you, just to beat the shit out of you. So police brutality is like nothing really new, as you know. And he was telling me these stories about, his growing up in Philly and, how tough it was to grow up in a city. And I'm sitting there going, okay, now I know what shaped your attitude and whatnot, because he wasn't the most warmest and fuzziest of creatures. He went to work and did his thing, but he was not a lot. He was, his upbringing kind of scarred him. And I'm like, okay, now I understand. But I just wanted to come on and talk about that. By the way, there was I on another topic. I kind of I kind of listened to the BGS for Women hangout. I heard a little, bits and pieces where the angry man was the guest and they talked about religion and Christianity and how Black people have been, as far as Christianity goes, it's debatable as to whether it's helped us or hurt us. I say Christianity, the church, and Martin Luther King, he was part of the church, and the church did a lot. The church was supposed to be, according to BGS, the church was supposed to be, doing what the government does now. If people were in trouble or needed some food or money or whatever, it was the church that helped out the parishioners, not a government. But and then the discussion went to how how whites want to study us and how we have a spirituality that is way, in my opinion, is way deeper than Christianity, than what is called Christianity today. And the conversation also came to music. The conversation touched on music. And I heard something very interesting about music. Music is vibration, right? Music is nothing but the vibration of sound as it hits your ears. And vibration is at the heart of the creation of the universe, which leads me to another sort of topic real quick. Is that why that prized metal in the movie Black Panther was called vibranium? Vibranium. Let that sink in for a moment. And I bring up Black Panther. Hey, Clips, thanks for the Father's Day wish. Vibration. Well, let me go back. Let me say this. I was watching Black Panther on demand here yesterday at home with my wife. She had never seen the movie, and a cousin who was visiting from out of town, he had never seen it either. And they were both impressed by it. As soon as my wife saw the scene of Wakanda, she said, I see the message already. I'm like, yep, there it is. You're absolutely right. But I don't know. I like I said, I wanted to just come on. I know there's a lot of people going live right now, and not a lot, but a few. And it's like 7:30 on a Sunday night. And I know I don't come on that often. But I'd like to come on when I feel the need to say something. And Dr. King, going back to him, he did a hell of a thing. He really did. And when you see it put in this context of somehow getting white folks to stop literally beating the shit out of us, it's a different way of looking at things. Now, granted, I've heard that there were Black vigilantes who went around. Well, they weren't vigilantes. They were sort of a protective force. They went around with guns and whatnot too. I had heard about that. I can't remember who, but I can't remember who these guys were. But there were some black men who were like, fuck you, we're not going to take this laying down. But a lot of us, unfortunately, we cut and ran because we were scared. We were the scared descendants of a scared people. But hopefully this people, the Black America, this uniquely American creation that they didn't know what to do with, will get stronger and become more courageous. I have faith. I have faith that our community will become more courageous, despite what you see online. You see the gender warring. You see the disagreements over how to combat white supremacy. And I stand by what BGS likes to say. And I quote this brother a lot because he's been in it. He's studied. He's gone deep in a lot of topics where it comes to social sciences, politics, economy, and all that good stuff. And he says that the best thing we can do about white supremacy is absolutely nothing, because it's going to peter out on its own. By the time the Chinese and the Africans get their act together, it'll be, the West and Europe. I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't know where they will be. They'll probably still be around. They just won't be as strong as they once were. But who is online here? My City, welcome. Thank you for coming. But we got 3 watching. Like I said, I will link to this. I will link to this article. And again, I want to wish everybody, all the patriarchs, a happy Father's Day. And please, if you hear this, once YouTube has rendered this live stream hangout, and once that happens, well, let me do this though before I go, since I'm actually at home. Does anybody want to come on here and share something? Because I can send the link. Okay, well, one day I'm going to invite some people. I'm going to do a hangout on a certain topic at some point down the road. But again, I want to wish you all a happy Father's Day. And please, if you feel the need, if you would like, please support the channel financially. We got a couple of links in the comment in the description box below. And that's pretty much it. Okay, let me see here. Let me see. Did I? I don't know I'm trying to think. Where did my logo go? How come the logo isn't showing up here? Oh man. I'm not understanding this. I'm not understanding this at all. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Mute microphone, turn camera off, adjust bandwidth usage. I'm not quite sure where my logo is. Oh well. Anyway. So in any case, thank you very much for watching, and please remember, if you please like, share, and subscribe whenever Quad B goes live. And As I always say, peace, deuces, and God bless. Click on the bell so you'll be notified. And with that, we'll talk to y'all later. Take care.